Like usual, I didn't really know what to talk about for our monthly ramble. The funny thing is that I always have like ideas throughout like the month about what to talk about, and then I forget to write them down. And so when the time comes, I have no clue what to talk about. But today, I think I want to talk about hobbies, and mostly the idea of coming back to hobbies, rediscovering hobbies, right? But also maybe the regret of wasted youth, which is a crazy thing to say since I'm only 24. And I've said that way too many times in the last couple days. But I think it's an interesting concept that I usually think about a lot. I had a lot of opportunities in my life, and I feel like I wasted many of them looking back on it. Not necessarily in like a sad way. Like I don't think about it like, fuck, that sucks. I'm in a bad position now because I didn't follow through with those things. But I just think about it like, damn, I could have had so many cool skills that I only now kind of like can semi understand, right? Instead of actually know how to do. And so I want to talk about that. But I do want to apologize about the fact that this video is coming out on the 3rd of March at like 4 in the morning instead of noon on the 2nd like it was supposed to. I just didn't have time, and then right now I've just been studying, and I wanted to do something else for a bit before I went to bed. So this is what I'm gonna do. So yeah, in terms of hobbies, reading has been my main hobby for very long. Not necessarily since I was a child. My dad used to read stories to me when I was a little kid, so much so that I memorized the stories, and I would correct him when he wasn't when he tried to speed run through them, right? Or when he missed details. But so I always had appreciation for books, but I don't really think I read until 3rd grade or so. I remember picking up the Geronimo Stilton novels and reading through all of them. And I think that was in early 3rd grade. And then in 4th grade was when I really started reading properly, right? I read Percy Jackson, Republic Commando's Hard Contact. And I remember that book specifically because I borrowed it from a kid that I sat next to during the tax exam. The first tax exam I ever took, I think it was a math tax. And tax exams were the old standardized test that Texas used to make you take. Right now, I think they're on the STAR test. Same kind of idea, but they're slightly different. And then my math and science teacher at the time was someone that was very willing to allow us to explore things, right, outside of our curriculum. And so one of the things that he would do was, if we finished our assignments quickly, he would read us some of the books he was reading. And I distinctly remember him reading us Isabel Allende's magical realism story, The City of Beast, right? And this is one of my favorite books ever. I have multiple editions of it. I have one in Spanish and one in English, and I think the Spanish one is the one that I read most. But I remember that my professor, or my teacher, took it out of the library. He would read it to us during class, and then, because I wanted to read more of it, I asked him, hey, can I borrow the book for a few days? And so I did, and it was like this like secondary library kind of situation where I was borrowing a borrowed book. And I finished reading the book, and I really liked it. I never got around to reading the 2nd and 3rd book in the series until much later in my life. I was in a bookstore in Mexico for some reason. We were just kind of chilling, going to the mall, and next to the movie theater at the mall, there was a bookstore. I walked in, I saw that they had the omnibus edition that had all 3 novels. I bought it, I read it for a long time, right? And so there, kind of that started my reading journey. And so it kind of stuck with me, right? In high school, there's a period where I didn't read for a while. And when I say I didn't read, I mean I didn't read novels, but I did read comic books sometimes. Like the few that I had, I reread quite often. And I read fan fiction for a long time. I just didn't want to read books. I didn't really find the desire to pick up anything new, even though I continuously went to the used bookstore to buy new books, right? And then I stopped for like a year or so. I spent a lot of time watching TV. I think I watched Arrow and Big Bang Theory and Breaking Bad for a bit, and a bunch of, generic shows that were popular when I was 14, 15, right? In 2014 and 15, because my age is like slightly more than the year, right? Since I was born in 99. And then college started. And I felt like the last year of my high school, I didn't really read anything. And then midway through college, I found booktube. And I started reading again. And I read The Furies of Calderon, the first book in Jim Butcher's really interesting, very weird Lost Legion plus Pokemon book, which I really enjoyed. And then I found Sanderson, and my life kind of changed. I feel like The Way of Kings really made me appreciate adult fantasy in a way that I didn't think I would, right? And then I found comic books, right? Kind of mid-pandemic, slightly post-pandemic, when I moved into this apartment, I started buying comic books. And it's been about 3 years or so since I started buying them. And I really, really like them, and my collection has grown quite a lot. You know, I refound manga again and anime and stuff. And about the same time that I was getting back into reading, I also got into fountain pens. And this was because I found a Goulet Pens video at some point. And I was really into this. Like, I was trying to figure out who I was, right? I was like, what does it mean to be a man or to be a guy or to be, you know, whatever. And I was reading these like dude blogs, I guess what is what you can call them. They weren't like misogynistic or, you know, like problematic, right? They weren't like Andrew Tate. They were just like dudes that were like, this is how dudes in the past used to be, and this is the skills and the things and the hobbies that they did, and these are some of the tools that they had, right? So one of the tools that I read an article about was the writing utensil, right? A fountain pen. And I really like the idea of owning something that is immensely useful, but also hardy enough that it will outlast me and that I can give to my children or to, you know, my sister's children or whatever, you know, whatever the situation may be. Something that connects me to the future generation tactically, right? Physically. And so I really like fountain pens because of that. And then I realized that I like them because they also feel better. They make my hand hurt less when I write. And they're just really great, right? And so those are my current hobbies. My hobbies are reading, whatever that entails, right? Mostly comic books, whether they're manga or Western, sometimes novels, watching TV, and fountain pens, right? But I used to have a lot of hobbies and a lot of things that I did growing up, right? I was in church choir, even though I didn't like going to church. My mom thought that it was important for us to at least act like we wanted to be in church. And so after I had my first communion, and before my sister had hers, we joined the church choir for the church that we used to go to every, you know, once in a blue moon. And mostly it was for a social activity, more than anything. My mom just wanted us to be social in a way that was like not necessarily forcing us to spend money, right? So we went to church choir. And then because of church choir, I decided to start learning the guitar. And I spent a few years learning guitar, and I left it, right? And I left choir. And so I can't sing or play guitar nowadays at all. But I have like knowledge of those things, right? And then I used to do tumbling or like, you know, gymnastics. And it's really funny, you know, you imagine this like 5 foot, like four and a half feet tall, like fat kid doing stretches and, you know, tumbling and doing crazy shit. And I did it. Like I was able to do them quite well. The only things I wasn't really able to do was like the hoops that hang on like giant pieces of cord, mostly because I couldn't jump high enough to grab them. And our coach couldn't really lift me because I was so heavy. But, you know, there was a way that we eventually got to do it, which was stepping on these big foam blocks that they had, right? And so I was able to get on those. And I could do quite a few things. Not all of them, but, you know, it was interesting, right? But then I stopped doing that. And then I started taking art lessons, right? Drawing lessons. And I stopped doing that too. Mostly, although that was not really my fault. That was more like the guy that I was taking art lessons from was like had his own little studio that was in really dire straits because he was a very like giving person. And so He was willing to let people not pay him for a long time, and although we paid him every time that we went, it was bad business sense in his part, and he went bankrupt and he couldn't teach anymore, right? And he had to move away to like a barn or something, like a farm. And so I stopped doing that. And then I spent a few years in band playing trombone, but I switched schools, so I stopped doing that. And then in high school, my school was a STEM school, so we didn't really have art programs. We had STEM programs, right? So we had robotics and science Olympiad and the math decathlon and HOSA, which is a medical institution type thing, and other things like that, right? But eventually, someone was like, well, what about STEAM instead of STEM, right? Which added arts into the science, technology, engineering, math thing, because someone argued, and quite well actually, that in order to do these fields, you need creativity. And if you don't foster that creativity, the people in these fields were not going to be very good at their jobs. And although I don't necessarily agree, I definitely understand the point, and I think that it makes a lot of sense, right? There's a certain art form to solving math equations and doing so in a way that actually leads you to discovery, right? And the same thing with engineering. You have to have a certain level of artistry to your skills if you want to design something. And you can apply that to all of the STEM fields. And so it made sense. And so my school decided to start hosting more artistic programs. And one of them was band. We had this old guy started a band, and then this other guy took over when he became the music teacher at our school. I played tenor saxophone for 2 years. And then I graduated high school, so there was no point in me doing that anymore, so I didn't. There's a few other things that I like to do, right? I used to I used to make duct tape stuff. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, duct tape stuff became really, really popular. Everyone wanted to have a duct tape wallet, and everyone wanted to have duct tape decorations on stuff. And so I was like, well, this is really cool. Let me make it. And I had a lot of fun with it, and it was really fun because you were being artistic without having to actually know how to draw and stuff, right? At that point, I was not taking drawing lessons. It was after I stopped doing the duct tape stuff that I had art lessons. And it was really cool because, there's a certain level of artistry to it, but you were basically just following a formula. And as someone that ended up in engineering, I really liked that because it was structured, but not so structured that it was stifling, right? And so I really enjoyed it. And then there's other things I liked, like boondoggle. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It was these little like plastic strands, and you would tie them in specific knots in order to make different shapes, right? So you can make a box knot, which was just like a pillar, and depending on how many strings you had, you could make like different shapes, right? So you could like make a cross, or like you can make a twist, or you could do all sorts of things. It was really fun. And then I spent some time making like jewelry out of rubber bands and shit. Like I did all sorts of shit, and all of it was fun. But I never really treated it like something meaningful. And I feel like I missed out on a lot because I didn't really bother to continue with any of these hobbies, right? Like, I have a bunch of the stuff to do all of these things in my house, in my parents' house, in my bedroom and stuff. But whenever I think about it, whenever I try to come back to it, I mostly feel like there's no point. Like, why should I do that? Like, my reading hobby, my fountain pen hobby, my collecting hobbies in general, collecting figures or whatever, give me enough enjoyment that my life isn't horrible, right? Like, I don't feel like the stifling pressure of existence like most other people my age seem to do, because I feel very satisfied with my life thanks to the hobbies I have, right? But also, I feel like I'm wasting time every time that I go back to those, because I'm past the age where it's easy to pick up skills, right? Or at least I feel like it is. Like it's hard to pick up skills now. And also, I'm past the age where, in 10 years, it'll be really meaningful that I have these skills, right? Because I'm an adult now. Like, having these skills isn't really special anymore or meaningful. It's just for fun, right? And maybe that's a reason all all in of itself, but it's one that doesn't really satisfy me. However, I've been really feeling the itch to draw right now. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I through the internet I consumed PewDiePie's 100-day art challenge, or maybe it's the fact that I've been thinking about drawing for a few years, and now I have enough time to pursue it. Or it might be something else. I don't know. I've just been thinking about drawing a lot. And I actually watched a bunch of tutorials earlier today when I was trying to not study. And I have an Udemy course, right? And then I think, well, again, there's no point in me learning this skill, right? Like, why should I? I'm too behind. This is not going to help my career. This is not going to alleviate any pressure in my life because I already have hobbies that do that. Like, what is the point of it? And I think the point of it is that it's something that's always interested me, that I never really got to practice as much as I'd like. And so I really want to do so. But the problem is that is not a defining enough quality for me to be, consistent with it, right? And if I am not consistent, I won't improve, and if I don't improve, I'll get frustrated, and then I'll just end up dropping it again. And so it's really like a complex issue for me. I know it probably, like, you're watching this, if you made it this far, and you're thinking, dude, shut up and just go do it. But, like, that doesn't work for adults, right? Like, if you're a kid, that advice makes complete sense. You have nothing better to do as a child. You might as well do something that might lead to you getting something out of it. But as an adult, I have other things I can do, and other things and obligations that maybe I have to do, right? And so just go do it doesn't really work, in my opinion. I don't think it's the right way to to motivate someone to do something, right? And I don't want to start and then demotivate myself, right? So I'm kind of unsure. And I feel the same about language learning, right? At one point, I was able to be conversational in Turkish. I was fluent in English and Spanish. And my Spanish fluency is less than my English fluency, but more than your average, like, third-generation immigrant or second-generation immigrant. Like, I only speak Spanish at home, right? We don't speak English to each other in my house. And I can read at, like, a fourth grade level in Spanish, which is not great. Maybe I should, focus on that. But reading in Spanish is not fun. And it's not because I'm not good at it. I'm fine at it. It's just because the way that people look at reading in Spanish is very different from the way we look at it here in the U.S. In the U.S., reading is a hobby for everyone. It's something that everyone should do, regardless of your social or economic standing. Reading is important for everyone. In Mexico, reading is important for everyone, but reading for fun, for pleasure, is very much a high-class activity. And in order to keep it this way, the way that things are written in Spanish is very obtuse and very annoying to read, right? And especially if everything I read in Spanish is probably translated from English, I might as well just read it in English, right? That's why the only things I buy in Spanish are manga, because those are already translated from a different language. They're not going to be translated from English. They're going to be translated directly from Japanese. And because of the way that manga is treated and the wording that's in it, it's going to be easier to read than a normal book, right? And so that's why I buy manga in Spanish. And then I have trouble reading it because my reading level is not that high, right? But reading books in Spanish is horrible. And I used to want to learn Italian and French and, all sorts of different things. And I was like, well, I already speak Spanish and English. There is no point to learning any other language because that allows me to communicate with basically half of the world already. I can communicate with Brazilian people even though they don't speak the same language as I do. When we went to Italy on a family vacation, my dad spoke to everyone in Spanish. And although it was kind of stilted, everyone was able to communicate with him back. And there was literally very minimal issues with us, existing in Italy without learning Italian, right? And it was very, very easy. just with Spanish, right? In France, it was kind of hard because they don't like speaking English, and then when you try to speak French to them, they're like, "Fuck you, you sound disgusting, go away, you dog," and it's kind of funny. But yeah, I think about learning languages, and it's a skill that I've always wanted to do, and I kind of achieved it for a while. But the thing about languages is that if you don't practice them, you kind of forget about them, right? You might be able to come back to it eventually with a little bit of focused studying, but well, I don't really get the opportunity to use any languages that I spend time learning, right? And I could create opportunities for myself, but again, I already speak two of the most white spoken languages. There's really no point in doing that anymore, and so it's really hard for me to find motivation to pursue old hobbies. And it's also kind of hard for me to leave the concept of wanting to have more hobbies, of discovering hobbies, because I'm very much of a dabbler, right? It's actually surprising that manga has lasted so long, that I've managed to make this, channel last 3 years. And actually, I think we just turned 3, in 2 weeks or something, because I started during spring break of 2020, right before the world ended, and time distorted. But it's surprising because I might, if I was any other time in my life, I would have probably dropped this after reading 2 or 3 series and never came back to it, right? But it is what it is. I mean, YouTube also counts as a hobby, and I've managed to keep this together, and I have not experienced burnout yet. Not really. When I feel burnt out about YouTube, it's more because I'm burnt out about reading, and that is usually because I've been studying a lot, right? And so it's not really burnout as much as it is like I'm tired, right? But yeah, those are my thoughts on hobbies and my personal history with hobbies, and the kind of weird, like, self-reflection that I've been doing about myself and my hobbies. But I don't know, it feels very demoralizing to kind of say it out loud, but also perfectly reasonable. And I don't know if that's good or bad, that it's reasonable, because maybe that makes it less demoralizing, or maybe not. I'm not really sure. So that's why I wanted to make this video. Let me know what you guys thought. What do you guys think about hobbies? How do you deal with the fact that, maybe you have hobbies that you left away a long time ago and you want to come back to them, but you're not really sure that you can? How do you deal with that? Like, what do you do in those situations? What have you done in those situations? Have you managed to reawaken a hobby? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I really appreciate everyone that does. So thanks a lot. See you guys later.